Original fear, original desire. When we were born, our fear was born at the same time with us. During the 9 months in the womb of our mother, we felt safe. We didn't have to do anything. It was so comfortable. But when we were born, the situation changed drastically. They cut the umbilical cord, and we had to learn how to breathe for ourselves. There might have been liquid in our lungs, and we had to push that liquid out so we could take our first in-breath. Whether we would survive or not depended on those first breaths. This is where the original fear comes from. We want to survive. As a tender baby, we have arms and feet, but we can't use them. We need someone to take care of us. With original fear comes original desire. There is the fear of being left alone, and there's the desire to survive. Even when we've grown up to be an adult, the original fear and original desire are still there. Fear and desire have the same root. We're afraid that we will die. That is why we desire. We desire that someone will be there who can help us to survive. We're hoping every moment for that person to come, to help us, to protect us. We feel that we're still helpless, that we don't have the means to survive by ourselves. We need another person. If we look deeply into our desire, we see that every kind of desire we have is a continuation of the original desire. Because we haven't acknowledged the desire of the child inside, our desire is impossible to satisfy. We want a new relationship, or a new job, or more money. But once we obtain these things, we don't enjoy them. Desire after desire, we never stop. Knowing we have enough. The Buddha spoke about the practice of samtusta, recognizing that we have enough conditions to be happy right here and right now. We don't need to obtain any more. Samtusta has been translated as realizing that one is satisfied with little. When we go home to the present moment, we view all the conditions of happiness that we have, and we may find that they are more than enough for us to be happy right now. We need to stop running after things, because even if we get the object of our desire, we won't be happy, and will want to run after another one. If we feel safe enough, it's possible to have no more desire. My little house is good enough. I don't need a bigger one. I have many windows, and the landscape is so beautiful. We have plenty of conditions to be happy already. We don't need to run into the future and get a few more conditions. What we have is enough for us. Once we adopt that style of living, we become a happy person right away. How can we adopt this wisdom in our modern life? Many people still believe that we can only be happy when we have a lot of money and power. Looking around, we see many people who have plenty of money and power, but who still suffer very deeply from stress and loneliness. So power and money are not the answer. We have to educate ourselves in the art of living mindfully. Caught in the past. Store consciousness is a kind of chamber where the films of the past are always being projected. It is there that we keep our memories of trauma and suffering. We know in principle that the past is already gone. But the images of the past are still there, and from time to time, whether in our dreams or when we're awake, we go back and experience the suffering of the past. We have the tendency to get imprisoned in the past. In principle, we know that the past is no longer there, that our memories are only a film, pictures of the past. But films continue to be projected, and every time the film is projected, we suffer again. Suppose we're in a movie theater, and a film is being projected on the screen. Sitting in our seat and looking at the film, we may believe this is a true story. We may even cry. The suffering is real. The tears are real. But the experience isn't happening right now. It's only a film. If I invite you to come up close to the screen with me and we touch the screen, we can see that no one is there. There's only light flickering on the screen. We can't talk to the people on screen. We can't invite them to have tea with us. because this is a fictive story, something unreal. Yet it can create real suffering, real depression. It's very important to realize that the inner child is still there, caught in the past. We have to rescue him. Sitting stably, establishing ourselves in the present moment, we have to talk to the child within. My dear young brother, my dear young sister, you should know that we have grown up. We can protect and defend ourselves now. Appropriate attention. If we were abused as a 7-year-old, we'll carry within us an image of that 7-year-old who is vulnerable and full of fear. When we hear something that reminds us of our suffering, it automatically puts us in touch with that old image. Many things that we see, hear, and experience in the present moment have the effect of bringing us back to that memory of suffering. If we have been abused as a child, almost anything we see or hear can bring us back to that image of being abused. Being so constantly in touch with these images of the past can give rise to feelings of fear, anger, and despair. We call this inappropriate attention, Ioniso Manaskara, because it takes us away from the present moment and into a place of old suffering. It's very important that whenever our attention is brought to that place, to that kind of image, we have ways of dealing with the sorrow, fear, and suffering that arise. The sound of the bell is a reminder for us to stop our thinking and talking and go back to our in-breath and our out-breath. The sound of the bell can take us away from the image of suffering and remind us to enjoy breathing in deeply, calming our body and mind, smiling. When suffering arises, our practice is to breathe in and out and say, breathing in, I know that suffering is in me. Recognizing and embracing the mental formation is our practice. And if we do well, we can go further. With mindfulness and concentration, we can go back to the image and know what has made it arise. I have this because I have been in touch with that. Many of us can't get out of the world of images. With the energy of mindfulness, we recognize that our old suffering is only an image. It's not reality. And we can see that life, with all its wonders, is here. That living happily in the present moment is possible. And then we can change the whole situation. Learning from suffering. Our capacity to understand suffering can bring forth our compassion, our love. Happiness is not possible without understanding, love, and compassion. Understanding and compassion are born from suffering. When we understand suffering, we don't blame anymore. We accept. We're compassionate. Therefore, suffering is useful. If we don't know how to handle suffering, we can drown in the ocean of suffering. But if we know how to handle suffering, we can learn from suffering. There's a tendency in us to run away from suffering. There's a natural tendency in us to seek pleasure and to avoid suffering. We have to instruct our mind that suffering can sometimes be very helpful. We can even speak of the goodness of suffering. Thanks to the suffering, we begin to understand. And because we understand, we can accept. We can love. Without understanding and love, there cannot be any happiness. So suffering has to do with happiness. We should not be afraid of suffering. We should be able to hold our suffering and look deeply into it, hold it tenderly, and learn from it. We need to know that we can learn from suffering. The goodness of suffering is something real. Without suffering, there cannot be happiness. Without mud, there cannot be any lotus flowers. So if you know how to suffer, suffering is okay. And the moment you have that attitude, you don't suffer much anymore. And out of suffering, a lotus flower of happiness can open. The Five Remembrances. The Buddha said that all of us have the seed of fear, but most of us suppress it and keep it locked in the dark. To help us identify, embrace, and look deeply at the seeds of fear, he offered us a practice called the Five Remembrances. They are: 1. I am of the nature to grow old. I cannot escape old age. 2. I am of the nature to have ill health. I cannot escape ill health. 3. I am of the nature to die. I cannot escape dying. 4. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. I cannot keep anything. I come here empty-handed, and I go empty-handed. 5. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground on which I stand. Every day we have to practice like this, taking a few moments to contemplate each exercise as we follow our breathing. We practice the 5 remembrances so that the seed of fear can circulate. We must invite it up to be recognized, to be embraced, and then when it goes back down again, it becomes smaller. When we invite our seed of fear up like this, we will be better equipped to take care of our anger. Fear gives life to anger. We don't have peace when fear is there, so it becomes the soil in which anger can grow. Fear is based on ignorance. Lack of understanding is also a primary cause of anger.